feel like the phrase "we've come full circle" has been used maybe already once or twice on this channel before, but you know what? I'm gonna use it again because this is my channel and I can do whatever I want. With that being said, we've come full circle once again. Coming at you from Los Angeles, California. The weather is amazing, and this poker casino, this poker room, this card room also looks amazing. This card room is Hustler Casino in Los Angeles. This card room is where yours truly played real money, live cash game poker for the first time in his career. Boy, did I suck at poker back then. I'm still mediocre, I would say, but back then, awful. This place, I feel like, perhaps is the coziest of the Los Angeles casinos. The first cash game poker that I played way back in the day, we're talking about throwing it back to like 2005 or so, well before I turned professional poker player. Probably hopped into the 1-2 game, a $100 max buy-in game, something of the sort. A lot of hands of poker have been seen since then, both live and online, and today we are back to play some 5-5, 1K max with at least 200 of our friends. A mere 254 people on the interest list. So yeah, that's happening. Anyway, I'm gonna get into the poker here in just a minute, but a little bit of sentimental value here, returning to Hustler Casino with 250 friends to play poker with. When back then I had no idea what I was doing, and you know, when you first start playing poker, you're incredibly nervous. You get the shaky hand thing when you make a big hand, and then you slide those chips out there to make a bet, and you got the shaky hand syndrome going on. I don't think I'll have the shakes today, but it is really cool nonetheless to be back here playing at Hustler Casino some 15 years later and being able to capture it all for the YouTube channel.
When you play poker in Los Angeles, there's 2 tips I can give you. Run good and don't hero fold. I'm about to give you a clinic in both. This is the first table I sit at in this 5-5 1K max game, and early on we find a premium hand, pocket queens. There's an under the gun straddle, and the player who's first to act raises to $35. He's a little short, especially with the straddle on, so when it folds over to me in the small blind, I'm happy to 3-bet and try and get stacks in. That's not what happens, as the big blind cold calls and the initial raiser calls the extra 95. So 3 ways to a not so favorable flop of ace king 3 with 2 spades. Good flop for my range, but terrible for my exact hand, so I decided to check this one versus 2 opponents' ranges, and action checks through. Turn is a blank and I check it again. The big blind checks too, and this time the player in early position puts out a bet. It's tough for our hand to improve, but it's tough for our opponent to have too many value combos. The best ace X hand that isn't blocked is ace jack, and should he raise call that from early position? I don't want to give up, and I make the call while the big blind gets out of the way. The river completes the front door flush with the 7 of spades. I check it again, looking to get to showdown, but my opponent isn't in the mood. He jams for $200, and we're in kind of an ugly spot here. We don't have removal of flushes. We block gut shots like queen jack suited that he could stab with on the turn, and there's 2 overcards to our pair. In fact, I'm not so sure there are too many worse hands that we could have than this one to try and call down with. But this is California, so f it.
21.
Oh, terrible call. No kidding, what a call. You had 4s that first hand?
One other quick highlight from this table before moving on is this man's fashion sense. Tough call as to what's cooler between the shirt or the favorable hat.
Nice.
Moving from the queens to a pair on the other end of the spectrum, we find pocket 3s and call a $15 wager along with 3 other players plus the initial raiser. 5 ways to a more favorable flop, this time of 9-7-3 with 2 clubs. Here's another angle of me and my reaction upon seeing that flop.
I'm the best! The best! Yes! The best!
Action checks all the way over to me, and I'm obviously betting
$50.
There's 2 calls. The turn is the 5 of spades, which makes a couple of straights and adds a second flush draw. The first player checks, and this time the player in the middle bets into me for $55. It's kind of a peculiar bet, especially being so small. With the board being as wet and dynamic as it is, flatting seems out of the question. If we happen to run into a straight, then we still have some equity, but no way am I letting my opponent peel for this price. I raise it up to $300. The first player thinks for a little bit and folds, and the player in the middle takes his time before eventually making the call. We're thinking red card thoughts, but unfortunately it's one of the many ugly possible river cards. The 6 of spades completing the backdoor flush, and not 1 but 2 4-card straights on board. Right on cue, my opponent jams for $500. 100 big blinds.
How much you got?
We knew going into the river that half of the deck would be bad for us, and now that we're here, we could basically flip a coin on this decision. It seems like a mandatory jam for my opponent, whether he has value or a bluff. The obvious bluffs are missed club draws, and that's about it, considering the straights that are now available. Plenty of value hands that he could show up with, which we have no removal to. If we're looking for an excuse to call, here's 2 of them. The first is that he continued on the flop versus a bet, so front door draws are a little more likely than back door. We also shouldn't worry about a naked 4 since that hand loses to a naked 8, and not to mention flushes 2. The last excuse? This is California.
I think you're good. Good call. Wow. Good call.
So he got a 6 on the board, so he covered.
Through one of your threes. Huh? I have king, queen of clubs. Andrew, sniff it out, baby.
And then you're up against like 2 people, 3 people.
In this hand, we defend the big blind with king jack of diamonds after a raise and a call. I think this is a great hand to 3-bet with out of the big blind, but I autopilot here and just call. That said, we do flop pretty well, making top pair plus a gut shot. Action checks to the initial raiser, who bets $45, and I make the call. We had diamonds on the turn, and when I check to the raiser, who bets a big sizing, $245, we have zero choice but to call here. I'm a little less comfortable after facing that sizing and thinking we might need to improve here to win. The wrong flush gets there on the river, and I check it looking to get to showdown, and that is what happens. My opponent checks it back and shows the goods, flopped the nuts. Nice hand.
Locked it, huh? Ooh, for the lock. Big winner.
Over on a new table, I get dealt a 3-5 suited, which is an invitation to burn some money. I do, and we move on to the next hand. New table once again, and we find 2 Broadway cards on the button in a straddled pot. I make it $35, and the straddler makes the call. My opponent is someone that I've played with many times over the years at these stakes, and no doubt puts in more hours at the poker table than I do these days. He likes to have a good time and thinks putting players in tough spots is much more fun than folding. Sometimes he'll have it, sometimes he'll have 7 deuce. Things start off well in this hand when we make top pair on the flop, and after my opponent checks dark, I bet $45.
All right, let's see one more and see what happens. I checked. I checked now, I mean.
He makes the call and checks dark again, and we see an offsuit jack on the turn, giving us the virtual nuts here. We're obviously betting, this time for $125.
No way.
He says, if the jack helped you, then I played this hand very bad.
The jack helped you? I played it back. If the jack helped you, I played it back.
Which could mean he has aces, or it could mean absolutely nothing, and everywhere in between. Eventually, after some theatrics, he announces a raise.
I'm going to make it $350.
Well, we could be behind, and while once again there's going to be some river cards that we don't love, I think versus a player who has all the moves in his repertoire, flat calling is the play here. The river isn't one of the worst that we could ask for, even though it does complete a possible 9-7 straight. Some other draws missed, and we still have top 2 pair versus a tricky player. So when my opponent jams,
I'm all in.
I just announced that I have 2 pair, and I don't hold his feet to the fire.
I got 2 pair.
We win. Oh, what a turn card. Jack helped you.
Okay.
You got me covered?
Let's see that hand again.
Yeah, I think you do.
10, 11. I got about 12.
You got me. Oh, what a thing.
To the blood. Saying this hand is making its way directly to the blood.
6 to
King, don't leave. Keep going, okay?
I'm just trying to get on YouTube. I don't even play poker here.
In this hand, we're playing 8-handed. Things are going fucking swimmingly, and the player in the under the gun +1 position makes it $15 to go. We have 9-7 hearts on his direct left in the low jack. I'm not familiar with the initial raiser, but my initial thoughts are that $15 is a small raise for the game. Granted, it's tough to get a proper sense because I'm changing tables every 45 minutes or so, but I think the general population is making it $20 and sometimes varying their bet sizes according to their hand strength. Again, at the time, I don't know whether this opponent is doing that, but I'm going to take the opportunity to put this hand that I have into the bottom portion of my 3-bet bluff range and make it $45 to go. The big blind cold calls and the initial raiser calls too. 3 ways to king 5 deuce with 2 hearts. Good flop for a couple reasons. A, because we flop good equity, and B, we'll have aces, ace king, kings, and maybe even more king queen than my opponents. They check and I bet $60. The big blind calls, and it gets a little more interesting when the +1 player makes a sizable raise for $200 more. We have to see one more card, so I make the call, and after some hemming and hawing, the big blind folds. The turn is a pretty looking 4 of hearts, and we make a flush. There will be some times when our hand isn't best, but you can't live life worried about monsters under the bed. My opponent thinks for a bit before checking, and we want to bet for value versus strong hands in my opponent's range. I bet $375. He thinks for almost a full minute before making the call. The river is the 6 of spades, which puts 4 to a straight on board, and my opponent checks again. At this point, there's about $650 each left to play for, and with that amount being less than half pot, our move is an easy one.
All in.
All in.
He goes super deep into the tank again and says he'll need a minute to think. When we fade the snap call, we know our flush is the best hand, so as more time goes on, we're rooting for a call here. It seems like he's in a super tough spot with a strong hand. Eventually,
Set. Tough one there. Tough run out.
At least he definitely made a vlog.
You want?
Yeah, I don't mind. At least that. Just like what he said. You stack him and then you get a vlog with the faces. Reworking.
Probably goes without saying at this point, but that was a massively successful meetup game. 16 tables worth of people on both day 1 and day 2 of that meetup game at Hustler Casino into that 5-5 game for $1,000 in cash out, a profit of damn near $3,000. So yeah, definitely a fun one. Also because of the hangout afterwards where we had some fellow YouTubers, some fellow poker players, some friends and friendly faces join us at the bar upstairs for some drinks after the fact, for the after party. Good times in Los Angeles. As you can see, this backdrop is not Los Angeles. Back in the home base now. We'll be back at Hustler Casino in a couple months, but in the meantime, WSOP is here, you guys. It's finally here again. The live WSOP is happening. It starts very soon. There will be more content. There will be more poker content. It could look slightly different though. I'm thinking about maybe experimenting a little bit. You know Andrew, he gets a little antsy if he's not switching things up every so often. And we've been doing this long form vlog thing for almost 5 years now. So there could be a little bit experimenting to happen. Some of you guys will dig it. I'm sure some people won't, but the vlog machine rolls on. Would love it if you guys would subscribe to the channel and at least check it out. And lots more to come, especially with the WSOP just around the corner here.